All right. Okay. Good night, everybody. Welcome to Fatherhood Talks, October 25th. Wow. I just want to say something probably to everybody. Um, Today, October 25th, is strange. I don't know why, like a 1-year anniversary of us having the band app, almost probably organizing at this level, because it was last October when we kind of really started all this, and at this level. So we're here, and I just want to be great, like grateful that we're still here. The fathers have persevered. We continue to be here to talk, basically. So again, I'm Ron Osborne Williams, and I have one child. That I know. You never know. You could turn around one day and you wake up one morning and somebody knock at your door and say, "Hey, hello, Dad." And I should say, be prepared for that. You never know. But as so we are here at Fatherhood Talk tonight. We're going to be having an interesting topic. But before we get to that topic, let's introduce the dads that are here tonight. Dads, grace the floor.
Good evening, everybody. Gene Robert Menard, father of 2 young adults.
Father.
Travis, I think you broke up. Donald Jones, father of 2, daughter and son.
Y'all give me that? Okay.
Yes.
Travis Jones, father of 6.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I'm a father to a tribe of 7 young adults and 1 grandbaby.
I'm Justin Gibbs. I'm a father of 5. That's about it.
Frederick Adams, father of 3, 1 grandbaby.
This is Dr. Doom, father of a blended family of 8 and 1 beautiful grandbaby son.
Hi, Fatherhood Talks. My name is Rohan Rodok. I have 2 daughters, and as usual, it's a pleasure being here to learn more about Fatherhood Talks.
My name is Ed Tenney. I have 6 children, 3 biologicals, 3 stepchildren, and a granddaughter.
Is that everybody? Elder Thomas, are you there? I see you, but I didn't hear you. Maybe he's doing his Robert Troutman thing tonight. We'll see shortly. All right. When he comes in here, he'll let us know. So the guys, tonight's topic, this is probably one continuing what we were talking about on our Wednesday night, Boyhood to Manhood. I thought it wasn't robbery that we got a topic about the discussion for parents raising Black and brown children. And I thought it was excellent to come right off of the kind of talk we was having last week, since we were still involving boyhood to manhood, because this is something that happens that we need to do to our children at obviously now at even earlier ages than when we had to do before. And I know there's a lot of different views about this, a lot of different ideas on how to do. And also question of what do you even tell your children? What are you even telling them about? What's the talk? As I was looking for the pictures for the night, and I just want to say, when you look at the thumbnail for this show, that are 3 books. I used those books, and so I'm giving the copyright to the owners of those books. That I used the thumbnails, and they can come get us, but but I'm advertising. These are 3 books that you can go and utilize to talk to, help you utilize how to talk to your children about the talk. And so interesting books there, but I just used the graphics so we can use it for us. So fathers, let me start with this question about the talk. Is it a talk? First, let me ask the question: have you had your own talk? Can you remember your own talk? And have you had a talk with your children? When you did have a talk with your children, what was that like? And I know that a lot of people are pushed towards, since George Floyd incident, but for many of us, George Floyd was just highlighted event that was very highlighted among the community. We've been dealing with some of these events like this for really our whole life. So definitely love to hear fathers are feeling and thinking about that.
Ron, it's amazing you said that, because as I'm sitting here thinking, I think deep in our culture, right, and I'm talking about way back to the motherland, or the inception of Black people, or colored people, or people of color, or guess what? All people, because just about all people originated from Africa. But being that as it may, when we talk about the talk, and I think about it, because it's not so much as having a discussion as it is about having a balanced discussion. And how do you convey that information to your children, right, in a way that it don't become a misinformation? It has to be balanced, because you can convey it the wrong way, which means you can convey it to keep them safe, right? But at the same time, make them scared. And so here they are, you trying to raise the most successful children in the world, most respectful children in the world, because they're children of color living in America. And so you try to instill safety, and it turns out to be an inferiority later on, psychologically. And I say it to say this, to the point that they may be pigeonholed to not use whatever God-given talent or gifts that they have, innovation that they have, to really live in the fullness and give the fullness who they are to humanity, because the way you may have conveyed the information of you have to be scared or weary of everything in this particular society, as it pertains to, you have to overcome it. You understand? And so when we hear certain civil rights song like "We Shall Overcome," then we got to start to teach the science of that. And so I think we have to be very, very scientific when conveying that particular message, to talk to our children as it pertains to navigating society, as opposed to being intimidating. And I think most of the time the conversations are more intimidating as opposed to navigating. And it was not meant to be intimidating. It was meant more to be navigating towards success and empowerment for Black and brown children.
Yeah. I definitely echo that statement, Lionel, because it shouldn't be like because when you put that fear factor, you start taking away some of a person's self-esteem and self-worth, almost to the point that they might start thinking that these things are supposed to happen to them, and they just need to try to avoid from them happening. Not that they need to, be mindful, like this, avoid, like you're going to be bullied. So just avoid the bully. That means that it's okay for these things also to happen to you. And that this is how it should be happening to you. So I really appreciate that. I like that. I like that you said that, because that's just something we just say, hey, we got to sit down and have the talk. And a lot of times the talk is, oh, we're going to have, there's only, I guess there's 2 talks we have. The other talk we're going to talk about later on, maybe in November, about the birds and the bees. But this talk right here, we might not even get to the birds and the bees, depending on some of the situation, how things are working and happening.
But what we have to do, and I'm just gonna simplify it for you. When you have the talk, if you're raising a black and brown child, or a child of the minority hue, you have to realize that you don't raise your child to fear the police officer. You raise your child to become a police officer. See the difference? And how you convey that talk will make the difference between your child fearing a police officer versus them becoming a police officer. Because I got some friends that made history. I mean, literally some friends of mine, personal friends of mine, they made history as Black officers. I'm talking about modern day history. I got one friend, they started the whole first 48 segment, the whole first 48 show with him. And right now he came out of retirement. He's assistant chief of police at one of the local cities in the South Florida area. And then I have another friend of mine, Delrish, who became, right after it was Michael Brown. Right after the Michael Brown incident, he became the first police chief of that particular town. And so when you convey a balanced talk, and I'm talking about where you can raise your children or convey the information where your kids can say, okay, you know what? This talk was a navigation tool and not an intimidation tool. Then your children will be balanced enough to know that, hey, just because you don't like me, that doesn't mean you're gonna stop me. And that's the difference in the talk. I'm gonna let somebody else talk.
I find it okay. So let me start like this. I think that when we talk about the talk, I know there's a specialness to it, right? But overall, the way we teach our kids to comport themselves is the way the way we teach them to interact and with others, the respectfulness. I mean, isn't that just what we're I think like Lightborn is saying, we overly tell them to do that in the presence of a police officer, which can cause it to be a fear. But I think if we're raising our kids to be respectful of adults, respectful of authority, period, the talk seems a little bit less, like Lightborn is saying, I think it'll be a little bit less of a fear tactic versus a educational experience. Because you're with the talk, you're saying, hey, look, you may run into this, and this is how you treat this situation. Not that you will run into it, but if this should happen, this is how you handle it. And I think once you start to do that, and you teach your kids at a very young age to start respecting, because a lot of the times things go out of hand because of the escalation of the situation. And we have kids that aren't, and I may get backlash for this, but we do have kids out there that aren't taught to respect authority. They're not respecting their teachers. They're not respecting adults.
Ain't no backlash for that, G. That's reality. Listen, I'm telling you, that's reality.
Yeah,
that's right.
So when you're not teaching them to respect an authority figure and they get into that situation, it only escalates it to make it worse. So I think what we have to do is when we're talking about having the talk is, first of all, evaluate the way your child views authority and how they handle when authority gives them a directive, because that also plays into it. Now, a lot of people will probably think, yeah, you're blaming the victim because they probably weren't doing anything and they were approached. Yes, I understand that. But the fact is, there's a way to handle it where you can exert your knowledge of the situation and get out of it with a calm and level head, versus having it become an escalation where someone's going to say, well, you know what, he was resistant. And one of the craziest thing is when they tell you you're resisting without violence, without any true confrontation, because of the words that you're using. And I think a lot of times we have to start with those basic skills of socializing and making that the forefront before we even start to have the talk, because that's what will change those talks, to me, in my opinion, from a fear conversation to an education conversation.
Hold on. I see Elder Thomas, you got your hand up. Or maybe just.
Oh, he was saying in the chat that you have to unmute him because he can't do it on his end for some reason.
Have to unmute him. I don't know if I have that power, but I'll look and see. Yeah. All right, I asked him to unmute, so hopefully.
Yeah. Text him in the chat and ask him to try again. Maybe to try himself.
Did he agree to the video?
I didn't hear what happened now?
I was asking, did he agree to the video for the live?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question.
You can try him again. You can just text him and see what he says. Maybe yes.
Yeah, Elder Thomas can log off and log back on, and it'll probably reset it for him.
Yeah, I think Lionel got the as we know that this technology is not the.
Yeah, it'll allow him to start.
It works, but it's not the best. I wouldn't bet my life on it.
You don't want the nuggets and wings? You want nuggets and fries? You said you want nuggets and fries? She said she'll eat the nuggets and fries.
There's no fries.
You have to mute him, Ron.
Everybody.
Don't worry. I unmuted everybody for a minute. That's my fault. That's on me. That's not on him. He probably was sitting there. So again, we're talking about this talk situation, and I think a lot of times we always focus that talk towards our young men, but I think that almost today we have to talk to our children, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a part of the talking to our children is, and I think you said this, Gene, and this made a lot of good sense to me, is what are foundations that we give to our children. That's how they will interact out in the world. So I know myself, I have maybe accused children I have been around of doing something, and I was wrong about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they took the punishment or the consequence without any resistance or restraint or resistance or any of that, because of what they were taught about authority and respecting that person. And when I found out that I accused them, I was wrong, I then apologized, and told them that, I was wrong. I thought that this had happened or that had happened. And a lot of times that we're talking about relational things that happens all the time. There is I know that, I have quite a few friends of mine, and Nightborn will probably say so, who are actual police officers, mm-hmm. who are actually the people that actually serve and protect us. And they will tell you, they might not say it on the record, but they'll say when somebody wrong, they wrong. But they'll tell us, they tell me all the time about the only part you don't know is this part that the person did this and did that, and that whole back and forth with the person did or didn't do. And that really results into how we communicate in our engagement of how we engage people. You know, you get pulled up. Listen, I don't get in any conflicts because I always feel like I ain't did nothing wrong. And because I never felt like I did anything wrong, or if I know I did something wrong, if I know I was going 80 in the 30, I don't pop off. I say, oh man, you got me there. What I'm getting. Now that kind of mentality, oh, you got me, means that I acknowledge that I did something wrong. You're not sweating me for no reason or bothering me for no reason. And that speeds up, I think I've learned that it speeds up my process. You know, I think that when the police are kind of taught, I think they're taught to look for something suspicious, like something being avoided. So I would assume, and I say this in our own human defense mechanisms, we do this if it's something we don't want to deal with, we deflect it. Or we do something else to cause interference or conflict about maybe you saying different things. So we have to really, and these conversations is not, I don't think, like Lionel said, it's not about saying, oh, be scared, do this, but teaching our kids the rules of engagement, how to speak, and also how someone should be able to speak to them. Because it's way different to say, sir, I've been nothing but cooperative, but I think it's highly, I think the way he's speaking to me is not appropriate. We have to be mindful. And I know that might say that because again, these people, human beings too. They got consciences too, most of them got consciences. And that plays something when they got to go back to their car and start running your stuff in and hear that in the ear that, sir, I'm sorry what's going on, but that's not, you don't have to really speak to me like that. But again, that,
But Ron, then we have to, so if we're gonna have a very let's say whether they're qualitative, not quantitative, but we're gonna have a qualitative conversation about and teaching our kids the qualitative ways to navigate the various injustices in our community. Then we have to first teach them the history that when you talked about law enforcement applied to people of color versus law enforcement applied to white people. And notice I'm saying specifically white people, because contrary to I believe historically and systemically, law enforcement engagement is far scientifically different with white people than it is with Black people. And that's because of the history of it. And so when the history of it is, it was birthed out of slave chases, right? So we got to understand that. And so you got to say that law enforcement was just not only birthed out of slave chasers. So it's for like the slave chasers became policemen. But you got to understand before the laws can make slave chasers policemen, it had to first have a policy to back it, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is where the systemic part coming at. And so there was a wider belief of inferiority that when it comes to law enforcement, it treats certain people with security, right? And certain people with authority. That's the problem Black people have. That's the problem colored people have. That's the problem every other color have when it becomes to that interaction with law enforcement. Not just law enforcement, it's not limited to law enforcement, but systemic, the whole makeup of the criminal justice system is in its totality. And so when it treats certain people with security and the other people with authority, you understand? And there's a big difference between security and authority. That means to protect and serve, you're going to give security to one particular group of people, but give authority to another group of people. And so when we teach our kids that, yes, you're not going to be met with security, you're going to be met with authority. You understand? Because that's the history of the engagement between law enforcement. And I'm just not talking about police officers. I'm talking about the criminal justice system. I'm talking about the lawyers, whatever the policies, the lawmakers, whatever the case may be, versus you being, everybody else that's getting security. And so that's when it comes down to, and we have to be very simple when we talk about this particular subject, because again, it's not a matter of security. We're not being met with security. We're not being provided with security. We're being provided with authority. And that's where the imbalances happen for most people in our history.
Hey,
may I
Lana,
jump in?
yeah, go ahead,
I'm
Eddie.
When I think about this talk, and Brother Lionel, that's very interesting about the two different perspectives, security versus authority. When I had the talk with my boys, I guess it was strictly from the perspective of the authoritative scenario. I talked to my boys before, I guess, right around 13. And they were born in the 90s. So one of the reasons that precipitated the talk was there was a rap culture that was very anti-police, anti-authority as a result. And that was something that I did not, I guess, allow my boys to acquiesce to or to give assent to. That I taught them that the police were there to provide help for us if it was needed. But I also talked to them from the perspective of their blackness. It's kind of interesting because my oldest son is dark skinned. He was, I guess, involved in that rap culture type of scenario, and he started dressing a certain type of way, started wearing his hair a certain type of way. And from my perspective, it was like he was fitting the profile of every individual who would be getting stopped by the police. My youngest son, he's light skinned, just a little bit darker than me. But talking to them as adults and their experiences as young adults, it is very interesting to hear my oldest son's perspective on police and authoritative situation versus my younger son's. They're 2 years apart. It's just very interesting. My oldest son would routinely get stopped by the police. My younger son, not so much. He never fit the profile. He always dressed conservative, dressed in a manner in which that he was neutral from the Black cultural perspective. But my oldest son, he's got the dreads. He would shave his eyebrow, and he had the beard and all this other kind of stuff. And it's just very interesting to hear their different perspectives as they were coming up. And when I hear them talk, I am so glad that I had the talk with them, because I think had I not had the talk and they were stopped out of and didn't know how to handle the situation out of ignorance, I promise you, my oldest son will probably be in jail, because he's has a very militant personality. But I told him that if he ever gets stopped, by the police, please, thank you, yes sir, no sir. If you didn't do anything wrong, make sure you just provide the respect that is due to that authority in that given situation, so you don't raise up any issues or raise the angst of arresting or a police officer or anything like that. But it's just so interesting to hear that perspective because I never taught them from security versus authority. And it was just, that's a very interesting perspective, Brother Lionel.
You know, I'm gonna jump in on something that you said, Eddie, because I don't fit in the profile. I have to disagree. There's no profile to fit once you're Black. That's the profile. I grew up, I didn't have dreads. I wasn't wearing my pants sagging. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. But I always got stopped. Now, it becomes and I can understand the frustration. And so, you know, when you have the talk, it's important that you have to gauge frustration in every situation, because when you're driving in your car, you're going by somebody at like 40 miles per hour and your windows are slightly tinted and they pull you over and say, you fit the description of someone we're looking for. What description is that? You can't see my face clearly. You can't see my eyes. You can't see my height. You can't see my build. The only thing you can see is color. And so, you know, that adds to a frustration and a level that you get when it's a constant thing that happens to you. And so, you know, you have to also take that into consideration when you're having this conversation with people and the kids, because it might not happen to you just once. It might happen to you 4 or 5 times. It might happen to you 6, you know, whatever. It might happen to you every single time you drive, depending on what area you're in, what kind of car you're in, and the cop's attitude that day. And so all these things play into a factor. So when someone says there's a profile that you have to avoid being, the only profile you have to avoid being is Black. Because a lot of times you can be walking down the street, minding your own business, they stop you. You could be driving a nice car, they stop you. You see what I'm saying? You could, you know, and it doesn't matter what you're wearing or what you're doing. It's just the fact of the way they perceive you to be. And that's where it makes that talk a little bit more difficult, because I can tell you, strip away the pants sagging. Don't wear the hoodies. Don't look suspicious. When they come at you, don't put your hands in your pockets real fast. Don't reach for anything like a cell phone or anything like that when they're coming by, because there's just so many different scenarios that you have of people not doing anything and dying. Look at the woman in her house playing video games with her son that got shot because they were running through her backyard. They perceived the person to be suspicious in the window and the police fired. So it's very difficult. You know, the talk is not, it's not cut and dry as to what you have to tell them to avoid. Because a lot of times you could be minding your own business, sitting in your own yard, and it happens.
I appreciate that. I guess when I was thinking back, you know, when they were young, it was, you know, you would see some of the rap videos and you would just see this anti-police, anti-authoritative language coming out of these rappers, and I just saw my son kind of adopting that culture. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking in my mind, dude, okay, yeah, you have every right to express yourself how you want to express yourself, but if you're going to express yourself in a manner that is going to draw negative attention to you because of some culture that has been disrespectful or anti authority, especially with the police, you need to make sure that, yeah, I may look like that individual who's in that rap video, but I do not conduct myself like that individual in that rap video. And man, I would just love for him to explain his perspective, because I know I'm not doing it justice, because he's told me, he's got stopped so many times, and he really has a hard time with police and how he's been treated, even though he's never done anything wrong. Go ahead, Ron.
Let me say something, because we bring up the important part of, I think a big part of us having this conversation is, as responsible fathers, we have to think about what our children may face, especially if we get like Ed said, if we have determined that we're going to give our kids certain values, we're going to tell them, have this talk and tell them a certain way they should do and what they should not do. And I want us to remember the trauma that comes with that, when, as Gene said, they do everything by the book and still receives the same result. It's one thing if I know I got the saggy pants on, if I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I expect to get some heat for something to happen. But if I am straight lace, up and down, not in places that I'm not supposed to be, and this and that, you see how in many instances it affects a person like that at a higher level, because they have zero expectation of that is what should happen to them. And I give it the suburban versus the urban guy. The urban guy expects the police to be antagonists. The guy who lives in the gated community, who has lived in a certain good life, goes to school with his friends, Ethan and Greg, they get the, he doesn't worry about these things. He actually believes that everything is love and fair and war. But when him, Ethan, and Greg get stopped, he becomes the pinpoint of everything that's happening. When it's not even his car, it's Ethan's car. And that has a major psychological traumatic effect on I think our young people in that instance, compared to, not that it discounts the urban youth that get that same thing. They don't discount that they have that same thing, but it's almost like you pull the carpet from right up underneath them. Their feet was feeling good, and now they're on thorns, and they don't understand how that is. So it is, again, our responsibility to, at another level, remind our kids exactly what you said, Gene. You can be straight laced, do everything by the book, but there are people who are going to be in the root of, as I would call, be discriminatory to you, because that's what they know. And so
I'm sorry, but there's a hidden danger, because I think, and this is, and I'm hearing the injustice in our own conversation. We said, well, I could see if you were wearing the saggy pants, blah, 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 the hoodie. You understand? And so when we say that, unconsciously, we give license to it to be okay for the harassment or injustice, or any injustice that's imposed on our children, only because they fit a particular stereotype, which empowers the what they call it, the profile. And we got to be careful, because I was on the Dr. Phil show about that, and maybe didn't have the articulation to tell them back then. You can't empower the profiling and then protest it later. You understand? You can't be on both sides of this. And so being on that particular show, and it was about the sagging pants. And so being on that particular show, this was like what you call pre-Trayvon Martin. And so on that show, I was trying to warn them of that particular thing. I'm like, listen, man, you can't weaponize the stereotype. And we accept the weaponizing of the stereotype and the stigmas of our kids their own impression. That's theirs. They have a right to have an expression that belongs to them. You understand? As a matter of fact, there was a whole industry, and I'm talking about $1 billion industry built on their style. Boxers, as a matter of fact, we know that we wasn't wearing boxers as children. Boxers didn't become popular until the late 80s on out. Other than that, every kid and just a grown adult used to wear briefs. Boxers was always for either adults or old men. And so I think we're so busy, right? Back to the trauma thing, Ron. We're so busy studying the trauma and coming up with formulas to give our kids about the trauma and the treatment that we didn't really come up with our own science to be the cure. And so when you don't have that particular, and then there's a certain inferiority that comes with that devalues your just very humanity, that, you know what, I can't be all that I can be, even though we're saying it. But how can you truly be all that you can be, right? If half of it was beaten out of you. And I ain't talking about beating out of you. I ain't even talking about authorities or law enforcement beating out of you. I'm talking about just the fact that how we raise our children, if they put us to the point of some type of rebellion or pushback where they may put themselves in a position to express themselves to be killed, we panic and beat that type of independence. You understand? Beat that type of, you understand, that ability to really come into their own liberation. I'm talking about education-wise. We'll beat it out of them. And so what we do is we start to graduate a whole bunch of educated cowards. Like, well, I get the job and I'm just gonna do just enough, right, to survive, but really never succeed. And so that's the humility. And I understand the expression versus, I'm like, listen, I understand NWA because I was in school. Yes, I embraced that particular song and that whole album then, because I understood the experience that came along with the expression. And had they not said that, because right after they made that particular album, we saw Rodney King being beaten, blatantly beaten, you understand? Almost near death. And you see the guys still get off. And so don't ask me for niceties, you understand? When I see nasty coming, it's only one card left for me to play, and that's the necessary. And so I think so much so that when Black people, even right now, when an injustice is happening, or you do a Black person wrong, or you take one of our kids, we ask for peace. I'm like, hold on. You can't rape me and hurt me and then ask me for peace. So you're gonna hurt me and then ask me for peace. Something is fundamentally wrong with that. And I'm like, listen, even a child know that don't make no sense. But we want it to make sense to us, and that's where the balance comes in. I'm like, no.
But Lana,
go ahead.
It's funny, as soon as you said it, made me think about this, because even when there was lies that we had did something, they wasn't going to be no peace.
Correct.
Somebody said that listen, Emmett Till, perfect example. Somebody said that he had did something. He wasn't no peace in his situation. He was found at the bottom of that river.
Correct.
So it is this idea we sometimes, we just been conditioned to say, oh, let's handle it in peace. I don't want to cause a conflict. And I think it comes from, we had a conversation last night on my other show that I'm on, and that conversation came up about how people in the Caribbean have such a stronger self-esteem, and they fought off the British and the French, and they did all these things. And I said, but one thing you forgot was they were the majority of the people.
Correct.
Like in South Africa. In South Africa, they had South Africa oppressed, but they was the majority. In America, you weren't the majority. If you started doing one too many things to the slave masters, even if the people who was not in slavery, if they felt threatened, they definitely would identify with the slave masters and the state and say, hey, if they're killing them, they're gonna try to come and kill us. So we need to rally and the numbers wouldn't fit. It was way too many more people than just us, and so it's always, sometimes we don't think about that. So we start thinking about, well, why did we do this and why did we do that? Sometimes you gotta look, look, everybody ain't what's the Opasa battle at the OK Corral. These jokers was going back. They was my history on this is bad, but the Mexican was going to take over, and they fought to the end and all died fighting the Mexican army.
The Alamo.
The Alamo.
Right,
yeah. With a little bit of people, but that go into that manifestation. They believe that they could beat. They could beat them. You couldn't beat the whole Mexican army. But that's a mindset. And I think that's where you kind of go in that we kind of have the mindset to know that we had to adjust what we was going to do because we didn't have the number. Like people say all the time, oh, you could have did this. Yeah, there's a lot of things you could have did. But tell the people in Rosewood what they could have did.
Right.
And tell them what they could have did. Some of them did, but it did, the situation, because it was way more of them than them.
But I think it also goes back to what Lightborn was saying. You're looking at the authority versus the security. Now we, as African Americans, as colored people, we weren't put into a place of authority in order to affect the change that needs to be done back then. You're looking at going to people not of your race to tell you whether or not you're good or bad. And so once you have someone else judging the actions and not understanding where the actions are coming from, or not caring, not even not understanding, but not caring where those actions are coming from, you're always going to have injustice. Mm-hmm. They can sit there and say, you know what, I want justice to be blind, but it's never going to be blind. Not when you have the table stacked up against you. And there's like Lightborn was saying earlier, there are two different laws of the land. There's one for the color, the black, the brown, and there's another for the white. And when you look at just the history of the sentencing, the injustice that's going on as far as imprisonment and things of that nature, the unfair sentencing that's done for a colored, a brown or black person, and the white person who gets a lighter sentence than his counterparts, you're always going to have that injustice going on, and there's never going to be that sense of security. It's always going to be that authority until you switch that around.
So that's really the conversation. That's really the talk. I think, as Lionel said earlier, the talk is not, ooh, be careful. The talk is to be wise and understand where you at, mm-hmm, and what the scenario is.
Yes,
correct.
And use your brain to maneuver. And I say this: once you know how the maze fit, you know which ways you should be going, and you find yourself saying, "I'm not going to find myself in any of these things, and if I do, I'm going to know how to handle it."
Correct.
That I don't end up in a body bag.
Hey, Ron,
it's cool. I can end up in jail, and then Ben Crump can come get me out. I rather Ben Crump come get me out than to be in front of the courthouse trying to get some money for my life.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Ron.
Yes.
My son, I asked my son to join the line. If he feels comfortable enough talking, I would love for him to share some of his experiences. I tried to explain his experiences, but only he can tell his story. So Josh, I don't know if you're able to hear or talk. Do you mind giving these gentlemen a short little introduction of who you are and some of the experiences that you've had driving while black?
Check. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great to be among you, brothers. I appreciate it. Thanks for the intro, Dad. I find this conversation near and dear to my heart. My background is event management and video editing, all things event, all of that. As far as my experiences driving while Black, I can remember there was one particular instance that was quite frightening to me, was when I was pulling out of park. I want to say this was around 10 or 11 o'clock. And as soon as I made the right onto the street, I was immediately surrounded by about 4 or 5 squad cars. And me personally, I'm a concealed carry license owner. So I don't know if you all are familiar with being pulled over with that process, but you might know that that's also an added tier of fear when it comes to that type of situation. So I was pulled over, and it was almost immediately. I had one officer on my left side, on the driver's side, 2 officers out the front window, and then another officer on my right-hand side on the passenger side window. They all had their firearms drawn already as they approached the car. And as I rolled my window down, I'm a firm believer that, and my father taught me this, and I think that saved my life this day, so I want to publicly thank him. But he always told me that within that moment that you're pulled over, they have supreme power over life and death. Now, whether or not you want to, whether or not how you feel internally, that's just fact, just because they have your life in their hands. So he said, so your job is to always get home. And then after that, you can then pursue whatever legal action or recourse, but your job is to get home alive. And so whenever I pulled over, just from being the myriad times I've been pulled over, my process is to always let them know each move before I do it, and loudly, so that they're aware of what exactly my movements are. So they told me I pulled down my window, or I had my window, or I pulled my window down. And when they approached the car, I let them know. They told me that I fit the description of a suspect in the area. I don't know what suspect that was. But, that's been over and over that's been told to me, that I fit the description of a suspect in the area. So I let them know that I am a concealed license firearm carrier. So they asked me where my firearm was placed, and the officer on my left, the officer on my right reached inside my window and opened my passenger side, reached over and actually pulled my firearm off of my hip. And then they continued the dialogue, asked whatever questions, and then they field stripped my weapon, and then they put it back inside in the back seat of my car after they were done questioning me. So that was just one of the most frightful experience I had, just because I had, 4 Glocks aimed at my face. Me personally, my background as well, at my last job, I was part of, or actually I created the race relations panel that was in Pompano Beach, where we, worked to try and configure, working with the Pompano Beach, the Broward County Sheriff's Office, as well as, figures in the city, to try and figure out, this was directly pertaining to the George Floyd murder. So all that to say, yeah, this topic is near and dear to my heart. I jumped on a little late, but I'm happy to glean any wisdom and to be a part of the conversation. So I appreciate the dialogue.
Hey, good job. We want to thank you just for sharing that, my brother. Because I think that this is an ideal opportunity for us to see the importance of what we need to do as fathers and work. This a live case study that you was able to see, where you get to see the father talk about what he expressed to his son, how to engage, what to engage, And now you're hearing him tell us live what happened when he had gay. And so that, if that doesn't make it important for you to start thinking about as fathers, when you're going to sit down and what you're going to tell your children, that this is a great example. And again, I want to thank Ed and Josh guys for even coming here and sharing that, because that it was very meaningful for the people who might be watching out here to be able to say, hey, we understand how you got to where you got because your dad was able to have that talk. And that's a big part of it. But not only did he have the talk, but also his influence, and it goes right back into my bigger, I'm about to get on the soapbox for a minute. My bigger aspect of our idea of the importance of fathers being involved in their children's life. They have so much rich experience, fathering skills to share. And this is one of them. Because, one thing I know is that, we'll say, oh, well, I hear this all the time. Moms can raise the kids. They don't need, listen, moms don't get pulled over the same way that they get pulled over, but not the same way that a son will get pulled over. And they don't have that same, and the police don't have the same fear for them in the same capacity. So, they're not going to probably get, well, in this heightened society we're in right now, they might, but that's a lot, 4 Glocks. And you're lucky that you heard your dad in your ear, because you could have been Philando Castile. God bless his soul. But that he told the police, I got it. And the police, he told them, hey, I got it, I'm concealed. So if I say I'm got it and I'm concealed, you already know that I'm telling you that I'm legit. But it didn't stop the situation, so. I see Lionel.
Yeah, hey.
Welcome.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Elder.
Oh, yeah, y'all kind of broke my heart. I want to mute me so I could talk. Well, that's all right. I thank you for the time. I remember I had a red car, sports car. I was going through my midlife crisis. It was a 2004 Tiburon, 6-speed, a big V6 in it, and it can roll to about 160 miles an hour. Well, anyway, I was headed to work. I got my tie on, got my shirt, stuff, and I'm over in the 4th lane. This is just going to North Broward. And all of a sudden I see this Fort Lauderdale, from Florida, highway patrolman. He put on his lights all over and had me come all over 4 lanes. He pulled me over. Looking, he got out of the car, and I stayed in the car, put down my window. And I say, yes, sir, officer. Why was I pulled over? He said, well, I can't read your tag. Right? I can't read your tag. I said, tag. The covering I had on protecting my tag, it kind of faded. And I'm thinking, is that why you pulled me over? And he said, well, and also the tint on your car, on they're too dark. Okay. I let him talk, and he said, well, I'm going to give you a warning. We need to take care of the tag thing and the film that's on the on the window. Another incident, real quick, I was headed down to Deerfield, going to pick my mom up from the pier. She had called me, she wanted to come home. It was early morning, I guess it was school time. So as I came around, they had a roundabout. I came around the roundabout, and as I came around the roundabout, and you're immediately into a school zone. And as I saw it, I hit my brakes to slow down. This cop, he's talking to another cop, pulled out his radar gun. While I had come down, I took my speed down to 20 miles an hour, and 15, and he pulled me over. Staying calm, cool. He said, pull over. Because you were speeding. I said, what? You know, at the time I had some dreads in my head. This time. And there's still a red car. And he talked another 10 to 12 minutes with the person in the car, had me sitting there waiting until he came over to talk to me. He said, I got you speeding. And he wrote me out a ticket for $256. Driving while black. That's all it was in both these incidents.
Well, what I want to say, because I mean, my teeth probably white now, but I still got two at the bottom. But I was always grilled up as a young adult, from a teenager to a young adult. So I always fit the stereotype. I think I kind of welcomed the stereotype. Needless to say, because I was big on not only embracing my blackness, but just embracing who I was, my individuality. And sometimes I think our individuality get void or get convoluted as blackness. You understand? And so because we are black, we're not even allowed to have individuality when everybody else can in humanity. You understand? And so I think oftentimes when it comes to our black youth and our children, that they're not given that privilege of they have the right to be wrong. All youth should have the right to be wrong. And I think I foster that, particularly as an adult. I push that now more than I ever before. So anytime I get, and I think every adult on here, anytime you get a chance to educate anybody, and particularly somebody of a different culture, you should do so. It's your responsibility and your accountability to do so, because your child life may be in that particular person's hand one day. You understand? And I think the real injustice of the law enforcement field, and I'm going to be honest with you, as a black man, as an inner city black man, I've had more favorable. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. And it may be by the grace of God, or it may be just geographically where I live at, because I think in certain states and certain cities are more progressive when it comes to law enforcement relationship with the community than others. And so South Florida, that and particularly Miami, and this is unfortunate but true. And the reason that we're more progressive with our law enforcement and community relations in South Florida, particularly in the Miami area, unfortunately, it's because of the violence and the riots. Unfortunately, sometimes people respect riots more than they respect respect. And they respect riots. It's unfortunate to say that riots get more done than righteousness. That's unfortunate, but maybe that's what makes Miami-Dade County and even Broward County more progressive in their police, you understand, community relationship than most cities that haven't had any type of civil unrest. And sometimes civil unrest, it has to come to that. I'm talking about evolutionary, not revolutionary, but just on the evolution tip. If people just sometimes respect shedding blood more than they respect shedding windows, shattering windows and stuff like that. And so this is why you can see America's respect for the Native American because of that 200-year war, or the Spanish-American War. And you see when you have all those blood-shedding conflicts, how that particular culture moves up on the economic or the civil totem pole, whereas our civil unrest is, and then I'm not knocking it because I think it's something divine and regal about a nonviolent movement or a nonviolent revolution. Something very powerful about that I can't even find the science to. But on the other hand, I understand the natural makeup of the injustices and push it back. And I'm gonna take and I'm gonna show you how crazy this is, because we know that injustices come in 3 flavors: racial, sexual, and class. So you got racist injustices, no matter what race, is just not limited to Black, but you also got sexist, whether you could be a female or LGBTQ2, whatever, QT. And you have, of course, classes injustice, which means if you're of a certain economic status, then certain things you may have to fight harder for just to get an even shake. Because of that, I learned from the sexist injustice that this is what they were telling women. This was a study back, I think, in the 80s, maybe early 90s. I think it was the 90s. They said, if you were being raped, this was the teaching. If you were being raped, yell fire. That's what was being taught. If you are being raped or attacked as a woman, yell fire. Now, what does that say? It says psychologically, right? People are more likely to come and help you if you were in a fire than if you were being raped. And we see that when it comes to domestic violence and different things like that. People will not get involved when it comes to those personal issues amongst men and women. But when it comes to those superficial issues like fire, then we have that Superman complex that we can run in, save the day and stuff like that. You understand? And so with that, when it comes to the racial front, it's almost exactly the same parallel. And so how do we approach when a Black person is being unjustly either assaulted, violated, or whatever the case? How do you approach that? What do we yell? Because if a woman is being raped, she can yell fire. But if a Black person is being raped or assaulted or violated, what do you yell? And the only thing I can really say that has been the game changer is camera phones. Had that young lady not had that camera phone in that George Floyd incident, that was her way of yelling rape. And so sometimes I understand the logic. We overdoing it with these camera phones. I'm like, no. I think Will Smith said it best. He said, there's not no increase of racial injustices happening. He says it's only being videotaped. He said, so ain't no different between the racial injustice then and now. He said the only difference between injustices then and now is it's being videotaped and you capturing it on video. And that's the true sentiment of that. And so when it came to Teeny's son, I think he was equipped enough and talk about navigating the talk, allow him to navigate that situation, not just as a normal citizen, right? Because he's not a normal citizen being Black. That's number one. But as an abnormal citizen, ready? In an abnormal situation because he was a Black with a gun. And so with that gun, it actually confirms, stereotypically, it confirms or it could have confirmed who they think he was. And they get to paint that narrative then. And I think it was 50% of what his dad taught him, but 50% of the father's protection over him. That's the God factor, for anybody who knows.
Hey, Brother Lotto.
And so I think we need the evidence from, we need both the conversations from our dad and our father just to get our children to be navigated correctly and safely through life.
Brother Lionel, what's interesting is that you mentioned about different cities or municipalities having more progressive agendas.
Mhm.
I grew up on the west side of Chicago.
Okay.
Had I raised my boys on the west side of Chicago, I don't know if they would be alive today.
Oh, okay.
And that's not talking about police injustice. That's just talking about cultural, black on black crime. Um, I visited Chicago maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and drove by where I grew up, and I was so um, disenchanted because the neighborhood that I grew up in was actually worse than when I left it. After all them years, I left Chicago in '95, and I think my youngest son, he was like 6 months old. So it's interesting that you mentioned that perspective about municipalities having, better um, relations, if you will. I don't know if my sons would have been able to had the opportunity to get stopped by the police. Just based on growing up on the west side of Chicago, they would have got absorbed or shot in a drive-by. I don't know what kind of talk I would have had to have with them other than moving out to the suburbs or something to avoid that culture that was existing at that time.
Hey, look at that you about to open up another can of worms. We got
my bad.
We're gonna say
My
that for
bad.
another show. That can of worms is Rich Dad Poor Dad that's coming up soon.
Yeah.
Rich Dad Poor Dad talk about what we can do when our kids is, if we need to change the environment. Rich Dad can say they move to the suburbs. Poor Dad got to come up with the strategy to keep his kids alive in that environment. I have a hand up, brother. Let me tell you something, brother Kevin. You don't have to put your hand up. We just jump in here. This is everybody is free. Well, go ahead, my brother.
Well, I appreciate you, Brother Dr. Osborne Williams, and this platform. Simply, it's just been amazing, and never would I ever condone or try to even attempt to make an excuse. But I do wonder one thing, especially when we talk about as men. I have two sons, 13 and 11. And I wonder when we talk about what we tell our young men, going back to the talks about interacting with the police. I just wonder if there was an opportunity, if one here on this line that is in law enforcement and that can give us from a law enforcement perspective as far as potentially maybe things that we should be teaching. Not that it's all about what we say because the police are always right, but I believe what I've heard, which is critical, is the knowledge piece. And I love the example at the end of the day, we want our boys, and let's include our daughters too. We want our children to be able to come home. In the unfortunate event they are stopped, I'm just wondering if we have any law enforcement personnel on the phone that can maybe share some experience, maybe share some knowledge, some wisdom, some guidance, some things that we can be sharing with our youth, sharing with our children in the event they are in a situation where they are pulled by the police.
Hello, brothers. This is my name is Al Norman. I'm in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for about 16 years here in the state of Maryland. I'm a sergeant with the Maryland State Police, and I love being on this call and hearing what you gentlemen have to say. Because before I was I'm a black man first. So, I've experienced the injustice, like I'm sure every last one of everybody on this call has with the police. And that's part of the reason why I joined, because I wanted to change that. But Yeah, it would just to kind of just to speak on some of the things that you were saying, like what we should be saying to our kids is one of the biggest things that I'm seeing right now, you know, with the when my troopers are out there and making traffic stops and, you know, interacting with the public is, you know, there's this huge, you know, defensive posture of, you're violating my rights. You're doing this, you're doing that. I don't have to give you this. I don't have to give you my license. I don't have to do this. And, you know, if I was to give somebody advice, you know, I don't think that would be, you know, necessarily the right thing that, you know, to do. I mean, if I was to tell my own son, and I have sons various age, is, you know, I want you to come home. I want you to come home. So, you know, if there is a situation where your rights are being violated, let's deal with it later, you know, because it's probably not going to get solved right there on the side of the road. So what I tell them is, you know, like if you get pulled over, you know, just make sure that, you know, that the police officers can see your hands, because one of the things that we learn is in the academy is, you know, that guns guns kill people, but they have to be in your hands. So if they see that your hands are free and open, then, you know, technically, you know, that's, you know, they're feeling safe. And then you want to make sure that you're telling them, and when you're reaching for something, you let the officer know what you're reaching for and where it is. And can I reach for that, you know? So then the officer knows where you're reaching, what's going to be produced. And technically, you know, that would kind of keep it, you know, supposed to keep everybody safe. But, you know, we've seen in history, in recent history how even, you know, following the directions it had, you know, have gone, you know, negatively. But you know, if anybody has any questions,
Brother Al, I just want to thank you for jumping in there and Tana and keeping it real with us. You know,
yeah.
One thing I see is a lot of expectantly and it's supposed to work this way, and that's just being honest. It is supposed to work some ways, but we also not delusioned to know that you're dealing with, and I say this all the time, you're dealing with another human being, you know, and other human beings, they supposed to do something one way, but they might do it another way.
And I got to keep it real with you. At least in my state, I'm not sure where everybody's from. At least in my state, I work for the state police. So a lot of these, you know, the white guys who work with me, they work in the outlying areas of the state of Maryland, where there's not a whole lot of black people, a whole lot of not a different culture. They're not used to, you know, seeing anything different except what they see on TV, what happens in Baltimore, in DC. So that's what they see. So it's crazy, because as soon as they get out of the academy, they send them right into those areas, you know, where you know where there's that cultural diversity, and all they know is what they see on TV. So they're scared.
I'm glad you brought that up. And as a father in Florida, as you mentioned, cultural diversity. You're dealing with, it's a stressful job being a cop, and I want to thank you for doing that, because I know what it is like. Now, it's also stressful for someone who's not trained to come into contact with a cop. Yep. We know that if you have two, let's say, positive persons, we can have positive results.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real. We do have sometimes two negative persons where power and control comes into play. And unfortunately, someone may, or some folks may get hurt. So I've always advocated, to training and being open to being trained. You mentioned something very important just now. Yes, you went to, you had a training, but you put these guys into a community where there's, the way they do things are different. So I always say, if you do something right now, you're going to get the same result if you do the same thing over and over again. And one of the things I would say as a gentleman, thank you for coming into the program. There needs to be more training, because let's be real, your car in 1990, let's say 1990 to 2023, it's not the same car. They designed it for more features, more safety features. And I believe many of our existing systems that are in place are from the maybe 1990s, even maybe the 80s, and it needs to be modified. So we can have a better outcome for our police officers, which we are very limited now, and for our citizens. And keep in mind, social media ain't going nowhere. And what you just mentioned about, I don't have to answer you, I don't have to give you my license. Let's keep it real. We're on this program. There are many people who believe social media, and social media is good, but it doesn't have a lot of wisdom. And again, we have to find a medium to cross the bridge so we can have a better outcome for all parties involved.
Hey, Ro,
and
you know, it's funny that I see you, Gene. Ro, it's funny you said that, because I remember a couple of years ago, there was a video where police officers walked up to people's car and they say, "Oh, I don't answer questions. I don't answer questions." It was a video of multiple people, and the police came to the car, and the people saying, "Don't answer questions." But happened, all those people happen to be Caucasians. And I said to myself, this is the kind of stuff that we would need to tell our kids, that this is not you. If police stop you, you can't just tell them you're not going to answer questions, because what's going to happen is what they understand from the person that they're looking at their self, they may not say, they feel like they got to answer questions because they looking at their self. But when they looking at somebody else, that's you, they feel you got to answer some questions. So just be, I think that you're right on point. We have to be the leaders, and we have to be the ones teaching our kids what to do, not leave it to a video, social media, the community. We have to do it, because they are our children, our responsibility. I'm sorry, Gene, cutting you off.
No, pretty much you iterated what I was about to say. And one thing I want to take from it, and I want to thank Al for speaking, is the fact that even in law enforcement, that talk is a little bit difficult to have with your own kids. It's no cut and dry, even for a law enforcement officer and their kids. So I want to pinpoint that and keep that in mind, that any conversation that you can have with your kids is going to be a good conversation to have, because the educational piece and letting them understand just how to carry themselves when it comes to that interaction is 100% important. And you got to realize, like it was mentioned, that these cops, they come from different backgrounds, and with those different backgrounds may come different traumas that they carry on to into the field with them. So that's another extra baggage that they have, that they're bringing with them when they encounter anyone. So you have to also keep that in mind, that you're dealing with people, and who knows what happened to them 15 minutes prior to. So you have to be in control of yourself and your emotions in those situations in order to have a more positive outcome.
Absolutely.
Ron, I believe, and I think the best way when we're talking about having to talk with our kids, and it's a cut and dry answer too. People think it's not. I'm like, no, it's very cut and dry. If you can raise your child, right, to respect everyone's humanity, authority will never be a problem. And that's what I expect when I raise my children to respect everyone's what we call humanity. Then that's going to start from the schoolyard. You understand? They would have had their exercise and their experience the minute they hit the playground on the kindergarten field. You understand? And how they started to treat from kindergarten, from 5 all the way up to 15 or 16 or whenever they start driving, that's going to carry over. And see, and I think what we're saying is, I'm like, no, it's not going to be different for for their peers than it would from the police. If you raise your kids to respect, number one, their parents and their peers and their teachers and everything else, that's going to carry over to the police regardless anyway. And people think it won't, but I'm like, no, it would. And that just simply raising our kids right. The problem is, I think where it goes astray is because Black people are in such a paradox. We just assume if we raise our kids to respect everybody else, they won't respect the police. The problem is what make us come to that psychology. And why, if I raise my kid to respect everybody else, why is that respect is not going to carry over to the police? But when everybody else raise their kid to respect everybody else, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's going to include the police. It's going to be inclusive of the police. And so I think that's where the dynamics get kind of convoluted for Black people and particularly people of color, because we just assume a child raised right, you understand, is going to run into the wrong situation simply because the person is a police officer.
But Lionel, quick one. Many homes don't have fathers. Many homes, let's go deep. Many of the homes don't have fathers. Many of the mothers are doing two jobs. We see it every day. We see it in courts. We see police trying to be a father. We have had fathers on the program who said, I stopped doing wrong because a police pulled me over and told me the consequences of my action. So we got police being fathers. We got police trying to maintain their own personal relationships. A lot of people don't know, a lot of police have the highest rate of divorce. It's a stressful job. Yes. There is a lot of things that needs to change. And I think Ron said it best. We are in a heightened society. And as long as everyone is in those Western shows like Clint Eastwood always has his gun, he has his finger ready to pull that trigger. Until we're ready, until we put our arms down and not ready to pull that trigger, we're going to see anarchy. We're going to see some things that's going to change and going to put this officer and many other officers and civilians into a position where, guess what? Somebody's going to pull a gun.
Well, no, I'm not.
But that would not. Hold on, Lionel. But Rohan, that's what I think. That's clearly what Lionel just said. Lionel said that if we, and I agree with this 100%. If we are raising our kids, I had to tell the kids in my class today that the other students are reading. Listen, you want respect, but right now you're not respecting each other. Y'all, I don't care what y'all can sit there and not read and talk over each other. I don't care. Because it's not about me. Because when I talk, I'm gonna talk and y'all gonna be quiet, but you don't respect each other. But your first thing you'll say, you want somebody to respect you. And if we don't raise our kids with that humanity of respect yourself, because if you respect yourself, you don't disrespect yourself. If you respect others, you don't disrespect others. If you respect the planet, you don't disrespect the planet. That's going back to the 24/7 curriculum about respect. If you're doing those respectful things, you're not going to do the disrespectful thing. And if we teach our kids those things, the interaction with the police or interaction with anybody, unless the person's a psychopath, unless they, a psychopath like Jeffrey Dahmer, that you're probably not going to run into that, because when people see a mirror in front of them, they respond to the mirror what they see in the mirror. So if the mirror is a smile, it's really hard not to smile.
Correct.
But if that mirror is aggression, you're about to get aggression.
Well,
but you have to understand when, it's not so much when, because I don't disagree with what Lionel's saying, but also it's the person who's being pulled over or in their mind being harassed, because that's what it all boils down to. If I get pulled over one time, I'm be like, oh, well, whatever. But if it's a constant thing within my life, it turns to harassment. And at some point you say, you know what, I need to stand up for myself. And so that's where it starts to deviate from, let me keep calm, till this is the 15th time I got pulled over this month. I'm tired of it for no reason. And so it's helping them navigate those emotions that the talk really is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's not that one time pulled over. It's not, I was doing 15 to 30 and you pulled me over. I was wrong. respect the authority that's wrong. But then we also teach our kids, you have to stand up for yourself when you're being wronged. And so that's where it starts to, well, I wasn't doing anything wrong and I keep getting harassed. So how do, that talk, like I said, that talk is supposed to navigate them through those situations. You see what I'm saying? And so, like I said, I agree with what Lionel's saying, because once you raise them to respect the authorities, and it starts with the parents and the teachers and their peers, it will only mimic when they're out in society, when it comes to their jobs, their supervisors, and then when they run to authorities like the police. It'll only mimic those. But again, once you start feeling harassed, it's a different type of emotion that goes along with that.
But you know what,
Can I say something? Can I say something? I can remember when I worked at North Broward. We would sometimes get some of the Broward County sheriff, the deputies in. One in particular where he was going to serve a warrant, and he got shot just above his the vest, and there was a load of deputy sheriffs came in. Some I knew because we all the time we had an interaction with the sheriffs, the deputies that came in, and relationships were built. What I'm saying is, I know at one time, even the sheriff department has said they wanted more of deputies to get into some of these neighborhoods and live in some of these neighborhoods, so they can be a better actions between the two, between the people and the deputies, and get to know them. I remember I was driving, I was headed to work, and there was a speed trap that was set. And when this Broward sheriff officer, the deputy saw me, pulled me over, he said, "Oh, I'm not gonna give you a ticket. Just slow down, take care of yourself." He said, "Because I don't know when I will come into their hospital, and you will have to take care of me." And I heard that from several of the deputies that are the officers, even to the captains and sergeants and things like that.
Well, what you're saying, and that's totally understood, Elder. Back to Al's point, he had spoke about something about being an African American law enforcement officer. I think higher than what's more prevalent than the actual law enforcement practices is actually the problem is the hiring practices. And so even if you become, you were blessed to be make change from the inside. If they don't change the hiring practices, which is probably one of the, I think in law enforcement is probably, if not number one, probably between number 1 and number 3 when it comes to hiring long lines of family members. I forgot what they call it. Oh, nepotism. That's nepotism. The word. I wanted to sound smart. Nepotism. And so with nepotism, and I think nepotism in itself is an unjust and unfair hiring practices. And so because I don't know, and back to Al's point, most suburban or just most white people get their experiences with Black people from TV. You understand? So if you get your experience, like more than 50% of your experience with Black people or from Black people when it comes to the outlook on Black people from TV, you understand? Then how do you approach that community? That's with correct. A TV mentality? And that's the thing about going on. And then with that, imagine this other thing too. Then we say, okay, they're scared. So imagine a police officer who's in fear encountering a citizen who's in fear. So you got two fear factors meeting up on each other, which is just a powder keg within itself. But then that's, for me, that's where the authority come in. I'm like, yeah, the only difference is that civilian is not trained for the fear. like you are. And that's where the accountability come in at for me. I mean, I was on a panel last Friday in a room full of law enforcement officers. I'm friends with probably one of the top cops in Miami-Dade County, which is the state attorney. Me and her was on the same panel. And I have nothing but love for her. But I can't let my personality overlook or override her accountability to me as a law-abiding citizen. And so I think that cultural competency, it should be one of the new classes, and you can always petition that, a cultural competency component in the curriculum for new trainees. I think there's a lot of ideas waiting to happen, but I think when in the Black community, we're more, when it comes to police officer, law enforcement relationship with the Black community, I think we're oftentimes too reactive and not proactive. And to be proactive is to say, okay, you know what? We have a certain, like Ron, yourself, you're a therapist, and different people with certain background. I'm a social worker, and we come in and give those cultural competency training. Even an economist that come in to give those cultural competency training so they can get rid of the TV mentality and we can instill the reality that they're going to actually be serving and protecting.
Can I say one more thing? At our church, we would have maybe once a month, we would have a session with just before COVID, we would have a session with the young men in the church and talk about what we're talking about tonight. And I think that, you know, I want to put about, I think that's where it starts in the home, and then it's the community, church. But I can see a change of some things happening with these young people and how they are and respectful and what we have said to them. Put to them about when you're stopped or when you happen to be in the presence of police, how you are to act, talk, and I'm going to get back to that once our church is opened up again. We're going to get back to that again.
I'm going to add something too. I have to say this to Al. I'm glad. Sorry to interrupt you. Al.
Yes.
Years ago, I'm a WhatsApp guy, so I'm not a social. I'm not a social media guy, but I saw an advert where someone was abusing a child, and it was, you know, people send those things around because it's part of their values, right? So they send those videos around. But I remember seeing a cop coming on and says, what you're doing is illegal. If you one, receive, two, send this video, you're doing something illegal. So what I'm thinking of is the cops or the police can be on social media, because let's be real, most of these children are being taught via social media, and if you really want, if you know, it's good to watch them on social media. They're going to fight at McDonald's, they're going to fight at a particular restaurant, and it's good to be on the fence, but it's also a good medium to teach. It's a good medium to say, okay, I'm in Broward County, I'm in Chicago, to be there, because we know they're on social media. They're posting. So what cops can post too. Yeah, you post when you save a kid's life, and we thank you, and we thank you for that. Well, you can post and teach, because let's be real, I'm from the islands, and let me tell you, here the law has teeth, in the island it got gums. So what's happening here is a lot of people are being bite by the laws, and most of those laws they don't know. Well, they know when of course they get bite. So I'm not saying to alleviate the stress from the police, the prosecutor, the civilian, because let's be real, everyone wants to go home at night, and we don't live in a perfect world, but we definitely need to start making some small changes that will lead into big changes that can because if you save one young man's life, it's a start right there. Hey man, I saw this on social media, man. You can't do that, bro. I saw this on social media. The cop said, man, we're gonna get in trouble. Simple.
Yeah.
Well, I think Rohan, you spoke. I think that you summed up. I think with the Thomas said. I think also what Lionel started with is, and it's funny because I was reading today in my English class. My students a speech that President Kennedy was making about the space, about going to space. And an important part that I pulled out of that was that he used the word that a lot of kids didn't know the word ignorant. They couldn't pronounce the word ignorant, but they knew the other word, because the other word that was compared to that was knowledge. And so I just think that all of this sums up as fathers. What we have to do is remember that our children will be ignorant until we give them the knowledge. You know, that goes for everybody. That goes, you know, that goes for the, you know, police. Yeah, the police, you know, because again, in a perfect world, you have all the police come from the same neighborhood. You won't have any problems like that. You'll listen, if the police officers, and man, this is my solution for all police officers, was from that neighborhood, from the place that they work, in the place that they live, you would only be having police serving and protecting. They probably would only need the gun from back in 1960 when they used to have a 1.6 shooter. That's all they would have really, and they probably wouldn't even have to pull that out, because they would know the neighborhood. They would know the people. They would be able to do that. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a global world where the police could live in a whole nother county. Not even the city, not even the same city that they work in. And so they have nothing, they may not have anything invested in that community. You know, so the perfect world we live in. But what we do have control over is the ignorance versus the knowledge. And we can give our kids the knowledge, we can give ourselves the knowledge, we can give our community the knowledge on what needs to happen in this talk that we're going to have. And it doesn't have to be downtrodden. It can be positive, it can be uplifting, and more than anything, it can be knowledgeable, because having knowledge is the key. So as we get there, we come down, boy, we went over a little bit, but we had some, it's okay. We can go over a little bit sometimes. It was a hot topic. This is one of the topics that it got to get warm. You got to boil it for a little bit, and then before you know it, the boiling over is the water all over the stove, and you know the pot is over boiling. But we had a really good conversation. I want to definitely thank some of the fathers that came on tonight, especially our Maryland brothers who came on tonight. You know, welcome. Hey, we're always here every Tuesday, every Wednesday. Welcome back. If you see some of the topics that we have, different subjects. Again, if you're watching this, you're going to watch it in the replay. Like, share, subscribe. If you're not going to do that, if you want to get involved in the comments area on the YouTube page, you will see where you can join the band app. You can get updates on when we have meetings, what our meetings are going to be about, when we're having conversations, as well as inspiration from the fathers that are on there to give the inspiration. So that leads us to tomorrow. We'll be right back here tomorrow in the private Zoom group for any fathers who want to come. We'll be ready to kind of almost maybe start really talking about strategies on how we can, you know, have these talks with our kids, and some of our own experiences that's a little bit more personal and private that we don't share with the world. So I say that to say thanks everybody for coming. You have been watching Fatherhood Talks. And fathers, if you could repeat after me, I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of courage.
I am a man of courage.
I am a man of courage.
I am a man of respect.
I am a man of respect.
I am a man of respect.
I say, fathers,
Father,
I am. I say that you are.
You are.
I say that we are.
We are.
Championship.
That's wonderful.
That's right.
So fathers, again, this is our aspiration that we give you to keep you through the weeks. Remember, when we are lifting our arms like this, it's not flexing, it's holding our family on our shoulders and our kids on our arms. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see y'all here again next week.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you guys.